So, puppies. Yes, hi. I said I'd go fast, and I've blown it already. I'm Matt. I'm old. I'm a designer who studied architecture about 30 years ago, and I got distracted. About 20 years ago, I met a lot of people in this room and started working on connected objects and machine intelligence and other things. And Alexander and Peter and others asked me to come and talk a little bit about that. And as Monique said, I'm currently working at Miro. So I think I'm a little bit in a safe space here. Who has a drawer at home like this? I knew it. So I imagine a lot of you are like me and have perhaps a drawer like this and perhaps also a brain like this as well. I need doctor diagnose, I think. And so I have this drawer full of stuff which is going to, which I keep because I know it's going to be useful one day. And so this talk, I hope, is a little bit like this, and hopefully it has some connections that you can use one day. And as Monique said, I used to have, with some friends, a design studio called Berg in London. Back in around 2009, 2010, we did a lot of sort of IoT stuff, but we also did some very early sort of machine intelligence and ML experiments that never sort of a light of day. So I dug this out. It's a very early machine vision experiment that we did with another friend of mine, Matt Biddulph, to try and instrument our studio and detect sort of sentiment and sort of patterns of collaboration and things like that. And we also had a lot of sort of catchphrases and patterns and things that we used to repeat a lot of recurring themes that we would resize and remix throughout our work as for clients particularly. And BASAP, B-A-S-A-A-P, is one of them. It's an acronym that we made up called, which sort of stands for Be as Smart as a Puppy, which I think actually popped into my head when I was working at Nokia a few years earlier. And it alludes to this quote from Rodney Brooks, MIT alum and roboticist and very good value AI curmudgeon right now, who said about AI, if we get the smartest folks together in a room for 50 years, we'll be lucky if we can make something as smart as a puppy. And of course, our reaction to this news is, that's great, puppies are awesome. Let's make machine puppies instead of other things. So we thought puppy-like technology sounded great, and we wanted to build those. And we also kind of were very fond of kind of like the way in which kind of human beings see patterns and patterns of human faces and things. And as Monique said, as a studio, we built this product called Little Printer, which was a sort of connected object that had a little face and printed things on a sort of thermal paper and things like that. I didn't have anything to do with this other than paying for it. So I did all the client work, and Jack and Matt did everything else, and lots of other people. But coming back to the BASAP thing, it was kind of we were also like very, as some of you know us, we were very sort of argumentative. It was more of a sort of continuing argument rather than a company, and we liked disagreeing with people. We thought a lot of the energy and in the conversation, all the rest of it was going towards this sort of route to kind of like make technology more and more human. We thought that was kind of a waste. We heard Rodney speak and we were like, we want to make puppies. We thought we could kind of like make much more delightful things on the other side of the uncanny valley, if you like. We thought there was a lot more to do on that side rather than this kind of tendency to keep pushing towards greater and greater sort of anthropomorphization of technology. Oh, the sound isn't working. Never mind.
Full spectrum. Computer increased magnification factor 4.
And implicit in, I guess, was a sort of critique of this drive at the time, sort of the early days of Siri and Google Assistant around sort of voice interfaces, which was a sort of dominant dream. And a Google VP at the time was kind of like, stated openly that the goal was to create the Star Trek computer. And a lot of our clients also kind of like really wanted things like this. And so we had to point out generally speaking, the reason that there's a voice-driven computer in the Star Trek future is because it's a television show. And so it's like really good for like moving along the plot of a television show. It's great for lots of other things, maybe like setting egg timers. That seems to be the main thing. But like voice isn't the only way to do it. So we're using things like BASAP to kind of in workshops and client engagements to kind of get people away from these things,
or at least the modern
which we sort of called flying car futures. And I've only just learnt this brilliant sort of makes me sound really smart, this word hyperstition, which sort of describes these sorts of things, which is
really something that unites the biggest, most influential inventions of the 21st century. The big movies have featured these
it's
flying
kind of
cars.
these
Blade
ideas
Runner,
that we see in our
Harrison Ford
fictions
the
of the future
1980s,
that sort of
and,
become real
Back to
because
the
we're so
Future with
convinced
Michael
that
J.
they are the
Fox.
future. And we sort of need to keep critiquing these. We need to sort of keep looking for these kind of flying car futures and sort of make sure that we're sort of seeing all of the other opportunities that are around them. Whatever your position on them, I'm sure we've got a lot of great sort of critiques of them in this room already today. LLMs are here and they're very powerful, but they're also in this kind of hyperstitial loop of kind of epic proportions right now. And disclaimer, I've worked on them, I use them, but I still try and think of them very critically as much as I can in terms of them being, the sort of materiality of them, which Ling and Usman sort of talked a little bit about this morning in one of their projects. And while it can feel like we and they have sort of crossed the uncanny valley, I think we can still look back to that kind of BASAP thought and maybe remix it for modern times to see if there's other paths that we can take for this technology. This is a quote from this Verge article recently about this idea that from neuroscience that the thinking is not the same as language, basically. However, my old boss has a different position in his recent book, which is fascinating, a really fascinating book on sort of evolutionary theory, computational theory, and the sort of basis of intelligence. And he sort of frames our kind of current moment as a sort of symbiotic moment of kind of natural and machine intelligence sort of coming together in a sort of symbiogenesis, as he sort of calls it. And I think kind of like being able to look at it that way, and I recommend this book, it's really, really fascinating, whether you disagree or not, but he sort of sees this moment as one in a sort of, extremely long history of these kind of symbiogenesis moments of systems and humans, whether it's sort of farming or cities, or entire economies. Like this sort of feels like another one of those two blaze, and sort of in his in a sort of accompanying Nature essay in Nature that he did, he talks about I like this quote: "Large language models can be unreliable and say dumb things, but then so can humans. Their strengths and weaknesses are certainly different from ours. And if we accept intelligence as essentially computational, which is a view held by computational neuroscientists, we must accept that the working simulation of intelligence actually is intelligence." But I wanted to sort of index on that first highlight that the strengths and weaknesses are certainly different from ours. So why, as designers, are we not exposing that more honestly? So like, I'd love for us to go sort of back to sort of themes sort of contained in that sort of BASAP idea, and sort of try and sort of bring those to the fore, if you like. This is some work that I did in Blaze's group in Google back in 2018, and we sort of looked at some ways to maybe approach this in sort of mock-ups, but also kind of like working prototypes. And this was sort of like our guide to this was like trying to, rather than what we have right now with kind of much of the sort of commercial chatbot experiences of these hyper confident kind of bullshitters that kind of tell us something, but then when we tell them they're wrong, they go, "Oh yes, you're right, you're absolutely," they tell us confidently that they're wrong and we're right a lot of the time. And so one of the things that we were looking at back in 2018 was like, how can we actually explicitly surface an AI's level of confidence and actual sort of uncertainty, and bring that into the kind of the sort of error and learning loop of a personal AI learning from you. And this is a little GIF of a mock-up that was done, some work that we did with Nord Projects, really great little studio in the UK, where we imagined a sort of dynamic UI that was built on the fly by the agent to kind of surface its uncertainties to the user, using sort of like really, mundane patterns that use sort of, a bit like sort of the red wiggly, the greatest UI of all time, the red wiggly line of spell checkers, to kind of bring you back into that loop of kind of correcting your agent, guiding it, being able to intervene in the moment, but the UI being built generatively by the agent. And so right up to date, just this autumn, a paper which sort of was released alongside the announcement of Gemini 3, which sort of contains some of these kind of promises of kind of generated on-the-fly dynamic AI, which is sort of coming from an LLM. So it's not just kind of working with you in a sort of chat dialogue mode, but it's actually constructing UI in order to kind of be a sort of collaborative partner with you. And in fact, yesterday, Google Labs released this prototype, which is a sort of AI-enhanced browser that creates apps on the fly based on your kind of open tabs and what it is that you're trying to do. It's sort of like these mini sort of ephemeral apps that it constructs to kind of, in this case, kind of like creating a sort of little simulation to explain a concept that's in the text that you're trying to understand. So again, launching from that thought of different ways to look at the ways in which these technologies are different from us, and exposing them more honestly. And this is about halfway through, so as maybe we're flagging, I just thought I'd bring back some puppies to wake you up a little bit. But just this idea of like launching from those sort of set of thoughts to look at machine intelligence, look at this kind of emerging symbiotic moment maybe, and sort of looking at encouraging a symbiosis with the human rather than a mimicking of it. So some other prompts from the other side of the uncanny valley. Sorry if anybody is an arachnophobe, but I came across this piece in Quanta some years ago, I think actually around the time, I think it was sort of like 2019, 2020, something like that, which is a piece around some cognitive science experiments looking at spiders where their webs are part of their cognitive equipment. And I was mindful of this as we were talking about the sensible city work and kind of like all of the things that we've sort of seen in the room and in Lingenusman's work, etc. And there's a really great phrase which sort of stuck with me from this article, is that it's conceivable for cognition to be a property of a system with integrated non-biological components. That seems to be where Homo sapiens is headed. Such a sort of resonant little paragraph. And to bring back the octopuses, woof, yeah, crab for dinner. Another inspiration, more for sort of architectural reasons, the octopus. And some of you who's come across this book, yeah, one at least, Peter Godfrey Smith, terrific book, Other Minds, sort of like the start of the, I don't know, the octopus boom of the last 5 or 6 years, I think. And just this sort of idea that architecturally you don't have to have like this notion, again, you don't have to sort of mimic. And in fact, it seems that we don't actually have like, we have a central nervous system and of course a very highly developed brain, but we have neurons all over us. We have neurons in our stomach and our knees. And, when the doctor hits our leg with the hammer, it's the neurons on our knees that sort of make our leg move, not our brain. And this sort of resonated for me with another sort of inspiration to me, which was Bertram Meyer of ETH. I remember him sort of, I think 20 years ago or so saying, saying this, which is, real systems have no top, which I've sort of, that's sort of like another sort of personal mantra alongside Rodney Brooks, be as smart as a puppy for me. Try and make something which doesn't have any sort of discernible center or discernible top, and see where that takes you as an exploration, as a provocation. Last one from the other side of the uncanny valley, raptors, hawks. I love this little piece of confabulated nature from the BBC, where they sort of try and show you what the perception of a hawk in the city, a peregrine falcon, would be as it tries to get a pigeon for lunch instead of a crab. And just as a sort of indicator for how long I've sort of been thinking about these sort of things, we know it takes a long time for books to become movies. This is now going to be a movie, so that's how long I've been sort of like banging on about this book. H is for Hawk, which is a beautiful, beautiful book by Helen MacDonald. And in it, she has this passage where she tries to put herself into the point of view of the hawk. The world she lives in is not mine. Life is faster for her. Time runs slower. Her eyes can follow the wing beats of a bee as easily as ours follow the wing beats of a bird. What is she seeing, I wonder? My brain does backflips as I try to imagine it, because I can't. And just that idea that, if we start designing with that in mind, couldn't that be kind of like richer and more kind of delightful and wonderful, and maybe more powerful than kind of like pursuing mimicry, pursuing kind of this kind of model of trying to recreate the sort of human in these interfaces. As a footnote, I did a sort of search and replace for hawks with machine intelligence in her book, and it kind of works. This is another piece of work that we did at Google with Nord Projects. And this is a sort of lens that has an intelligence, a teachable intelligence within it. So it's a sort of intervention in the sort of camera stack of a phone, but an intervention that is sort of based on being able to teach sort of aesthetics, personal aesthetics to the phone, so that it can kind of almost search for it in collaboration with you to sort of capture different things that you might not first see as you're sort of using it. And so I'm sure some of you have sort of bandied this word around, such as I have, but this idea of like trying to use machine intelligence to create complementary, symbiotic umwelts, ways of seeing the world. This is a really bad joke.
I just shout, bat!
Has anybody seen this?
Human form!
Okay. But rather than just showing this book by Thomas Nagel from 1974, but this idea of, has been cited before, of course, and sort of explored before in the sort of in psychology and the liberal arts and animal psychology, Frans van der Waal, all the rest of it, and sort of very beautifully explored and written about by James in his book Ways of Being. And we saw it beautifully this morning in Lingen Usman's work and practice this morning. But I sort of wanted to bring it back to my sort of evil world of AI and LLMs and technology, because it's surprising, because that world, the tech world, is sort of heading there too, it seems. There's a growing suspicion, not just as we saw earlier from cognitive neuroscience, that we sort of have to pursue things beyond language to kind of get to the goals that they have. But just this last week or so in San Diego at NeurIPS, a lot of conversation, a lot of debate around whether large language models will need to be supplanted or at least complemented by other more embodied and sort of physically grounded approaches, which are getting sort of categorized as sort of world models. And playing in the background there was a video from Google DeepMind in their announcement of their kind of like set of world models that they're putting out there. And Fei-Fei Li, who's one of the sort of, OG godmothers, if you like, of this sort of recent AI boom, has a great recent essay on Substack, and just a little line from that. Spatial intelligence is the scaffolding upon which our cognition is built. It's at work when we passively observe or actively seek to create. It drives our reasoning and planning, even on the most abstract topics. and it's essential to the way that we interact, verbally or physically, with our peers or with the environment itself. And this is some work from some old friends from Google who have left and made a startup which is sort of based in this world of sort of physically grounded AI models, and specifically they're looking at kind of creating models from a multiplicity of time series sensor data, and their company is called Archetype.
Imagine an AI that can learn how the world works on its own, just by observing it. Will it reach the same conclusions about reality as us, or will it discover something entirely new? We trained an AI model on hundreds of millions of sensor measurements, enabling it to experience the physical world firsthand, including power grid demand, atmospheric pressure, hydrodynamic flows, and more. We call this model Newton, a physical AI foundation model.
To test if Newton had learned to characterize general physical behavior, we tasked it with predicting the behavior of systems it had never seen before.
We started with elementary physics experiments. Newton could accurately predict the future behavior of classic mechanical systems, even chaotic behaviors.
Well, you can look that up yourself. But it's fascinating stuff, and they're a really small company doing really interesting things. They mentioned the electrical grid as part of that, and here's some work from my time at Lunar Energy, which was a solar battery company, which can sort of illustrate the potential for some of these approaches, maybe. This is, there's a fleet of batteries in Japan, which is controlled by their lunar AI platform. And these are batteries that can read the weather report. And so this is a time series plot here of, and on the left-hand side, you can see a typhoon approaching the South Island there of Japan. And the platform is directing the batteries to charge themselves up on the energy available from a grid to make the island grid more resilient before the typhoon arrives. So you can start to have these infrastructures start to respond to the environment around them. And we sort of did some experiments to kind of bring this to life. This was some work I did with Tom Armitage, a colleague from Berg as well, to kind of, in sound and data viz, sort of like show things like this. So the sun is coming up, the batteries are charging up with the sunshine. 10 o'clock, midday, start to charge all the way through the day. So this is sonification so that you can sort of tell the rhythm. Hopefully we were trying to sort of get across the behavior of the batteries and the network through this and make it a bit more visceral. And then when you get to the afternoon, the batteries are full and they get coordinated to start to discharge through the nighttime. And all of this music you're hearing is generative music that's coming from the behavior of the data. And this is a really bad joke. Maybe this is what it's like to be a battery. Sorry. And we had some of our own, sonic hyperstition here. I'll just put this in. Is it going to play? All right, so just to wrap up, last few minutes. This summer, I had an experience that I never had before. I'm going to read this because it's sort of a little hard. I was caught in a wildfire. And I could see that wildfire on a map from space. And there was a machine intelligence detecting, a world model detecting that and putting it on the map. But I took that video and I saw it with my eyes through the camera, and with my own eyes, I looked to the left and I saw it about 500 meters from me. And I got out. Driving through flames is a lot cooler in the movies than in real life. It was probably the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. But I was very lucky. I got out of there. I was also very lucky that I was a tourist. I didn't have to keep living there. I have the privilege to leave and move and do these sorts of things. But we're in a world right now where these type of experiences are going to become more and more common. as Ling and Usman talked about this morning, and as they said as well, like the only way out is through, right? And so we're building these sort of sensory skins, if you like. This is a European-built satellite, an ISI Gen 4 satellite that's designed and built in Europe, and does this kind of like brilliant Earth observation. And just last week they published kind of the data that they were using to help emergency responders in Southeast Asia around the terrible flooding that's happened there. And we're building these amazing technological capabilities. But we can, as Ling said this morning, we can know more and more and not unlock it in the right way and design it in the right way to get the regenerative. I don't know if this is quite the quote, but I loved it. It's kind of like, once we know everything, we just doom scroll. And that's sort of like a warning to us, right? We can build all of these amazing things. We can know all of this stuff. We can do all of the sensible city stuff, but it is about taking action and designing stuff in the right way together. How might we follow Ling and Usman's example and use these really powerful new technologies, these really powerful world modeling technologies, beyond trying to create certain schemes that have failed to improve the human condition? So we tried seeing like a state. We're still going to see like a state. We're still going to have nation states probably, right? And we're also going to have all sorts of other entangled efforts, as Ling and Usman described this morning. And as well as Ling and Usman's work, there are responses like the Resonant Computing Manifesto that just came out, and disclosure, I'm a co-signee and supporter of it, but it's come out of Silicon Valley. It's come out of the people who, caused some of this mess, maybe. So that gives me hope. And, the work that the Antikythera Institute organization are publishing around planetary sapience and kind of like creating these kind of like seeing like a planet rather than like seeing like a state approaches, that gives me hope that we can kind of resize and remix and regenerate our lives and the living systems of the planet. Who's read A Half-Built Garden? It's kind of great, apart from the bits that aren't. But it's a sort of novel about an AI-assisted near-future permaculture by Ruth Anna Emrys, and that gives me hope. And the rise of bioregional design, and indeed like bioregional seeing, like we saw, and maybe the world models will see bioregions rather than borders. So this is the Bioregional Design Report published by the Future Observatory at the Design Museum in London, and that gives me hope. And I'll leave you with the symbiotic nature combined with AI, combined with sort of, scavengers, rain on Earth, work of my friends at Superflux, and their project asks, I guess, what is it like to be a river? And with that, I will say thank you very, very much for your attention. I will not be taking questions at this time.
All right. The one I wanted to ask is, there's a lot of young people here that are just starting in their design careers. Yeah. You've been through a lot of industries, a lot of technologies.
Yes.
What is the recommendation you have for them? Because
sure.
you describe in a world of physical AI, of sensors, of new projects, new thinking.
I don't think I have any good recommendations. I mean, there's been such great work shown today as well, but and I think in the work you see it, like the only recommendation I would have is like, not only, as Ling and Usman pointed out from Donna Haraway, stay with the trouble, but also I would say stay with the material. Like basically my whatever longevity I've had, if you like, has been around sort of not only looking to the context of the work, but also the material context of work. Sort of at Berg, we talked a lot about material exploration as the sort of basis, and finding the things that, finding the weird things that the technologies want to do, and seeing whether you agree with them or not, or subverting them to do other things. And I think, I don't know, I think right now is a really, we were talking about this earlier off to the side, like it's a time of enormous hype and enormous kind of, you know, things that seem kind of like out of our control that we can't critique or change or whatever it might be. But again, as Linga Nusman said in her amazing talk this morning, the only way out is through. And I think the only other way through is to understand the material and play with it, explore it, and design brilliant things like you guys already have today. So for whatever that's worth.
Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much. Big hand for Matt.